Hi everyone! I came across some instructions online on how to build a motorized Iron Man helmet using 3D printed parts, and I'd been thinking for a while that it would be fun to try and make one myself. I downloaded the print files and assembly instructions. The assembly manual alone had 175 different steps. There was also a separate guide just for the electronics. So, I knew I had quite a lot of work ahead of me. Before I could even start assembling or wiring the electronics, I obviously had to print all the parts. There were dozens of different pieces, and I immediately hit my first snag. My 3D printer is small enough that I couldn't print the largest pieces in one go because they exceeded the print area. Well, it wasn't an insurmountable problem. I fired up Mesh Mixer and split the larger parts into sizes that would fit my printer. Some parts had to be split into as many as 4 pieces. At the same time, I added small cone-shaped alignment pins to the seams to make it easier to glue them back together later. Then it was time to print. I used a resin printer with ABS-like water-washable resin, and there was plenty to print. One print job usually took 3 to 4 hours, and there were quite a few of them. It took about 3 days to print all the parts, and the machine was running pretty much day and night. Once I had all the parts printed, it was time for gluing, specifically joining the pieces I had split earlier. At first, I thought about using regular glue, but then I realized I could use the same resin I used for printing. I brushed it onto the seams and cured it with a UV lamp. I have to say, it turned out to be a great method. It held the pieces together really well. Next, I needed to get some color on the surface. I bought various spray paints and sandpaper and started by sanding the glued seams smooth. Then I started wondering if the resin needed a primer first. I went looking for answers on discussion forums and after a while, I found the answer I was looking for. During the painting process, I did notice that it probably would have been good to use some kind of primer underneath. I had to sand and repaint some parts several times, especially the red ones. The black and silver parts turned out better, and eventually, I got everything painted. The instructions included a long list of various electronic components, screws, and other items that needed to be ordered before I could continue. I ordered the parts, and once they started arriving in the mail, I could finally begin the assembly. First, I had to do all the wiring. There was a dedicated manual for this, showing all the necessary connections, wire lengths, and so on. This stage was actually relatively pleasant, even though it required time and focus. So, this helmet features an Arduino controller and a servo driver module. There are 10 servos in total. They required a bit of tinkering since I had to shorten some wires and lengthen others to make them the right fit. In addition to this, the helmet's eyes have LED lights, and the whole thing is powered by a small USB power bank.
Neon whispers, a shadow. just a scheme, falling deeper in this neon dream. Neon dreams, they pull me under. Colors crash like distant thunder. Lost in glow, I can't escape. Subspace calls, it shifts my shape. A thousand signs, they blur, they blend. Each one a truth I can't defend. Reflections twist, they smile, they fade. In this electric masquerade.
Once the electronics were done, I uploaded the correct program to the Arduino and tested that it worked. With everything in order, I finally got to the actual building phase.
Neon dreams, they pull me under. Colors crash like distant thunder. Lost in glow, I can't escape. Subspace calls, it shifts my shape.
First, I assembled the red outer shells of the helmet.
Raindrops whisper on the glass, soft like secrets fading fast. Golden leaves on empty streets, they sigh. Falling like leaves, drifting away. Autumn is calling, no time to stay. The world turns quiet, the sky turns gray.
Then it was time for the Arduino, the servo driver, and the first few servos.
Boots on puddles, splashes small. Chill in the air, it touches all. The trees are shedding, letting go of their pride. The wind hums low, a June so there. Winter's breath is in the air. Falling like leaves, drifting away. Autumn is calling, no time to stay. The world turns.
Then I started building the faceplate with the silver parts. The instructions specified what kind of screws to use for each part, but I ran into some issues with them. Namely, the material the parts are printed from is soft enough that the screws didn't really want to stay put. They stripped the holes quite easily, especially if I had to remove a screw and retighten it. I used glue with some of the screws to keep them in place, but that might not be the most permanent solution. For now, it'll have to do. Otherwise, the assembly was relatively straightforward. There were issues with some parts not quite fitting into place or moving correctly, so I had to adjust their attachments a bit.
pulling crowds, city's heartbeat, moonlit drifter, old man at the diner. Neon and street lights, some chase dreams, some chase fights, but who's really who? City's lights paint the sky. Shadows are fading, shadows are fading. Neon's glow ignites the night. Neon's glow ignites the night.
After all the adjusting and screwing, I reached the point where the helmet was more or less put together. It's still missing the LED eyes and a few other parts, but it's finished enough that I can finally give it a little test run. In the next video, the build continues. I'll be tackling the problems that came up, finishing the assembly, and adding the final touches. Thanks for watching. See you next time.